All right. Well, again, thanks everybody. Like I say, every time we have these coaches meeting, thank you guys for taking the time um, on Thursday night to touch base with us and kind of get some updates with return to play. I was just thinking about this earlier today that we started the return to play, like we started return to play in the beginning of August, and now we're at the end of December. So it's kind of crazy. It's been 4 months since we've kind of got back into things, and it's kind of been a little bit of a roller coaster of numbers and information and all that type of stuff. So we appreciate you sticking with us and asking questions and following along and staying up to date with everything. So thank you for that. I don't know if there's some people who might be joining here. I assume there might be some new agencies as we start to get ready for the beginning of next year with winter games and basketball skills and all that stuff going on too. So if there's some questions that maybe have answered before, don't worry about. We're more than okay with answering those questions as we go through things as well. Tonight, we invited Miranda from our development team to come on and share with you guys a little bit about what's going on with Plunge this year. I know that Polar Plunge is a fundraiser for a lot of your agency accounts. And so Miranda wanted to share what's new and what's going on with 2021 and then be able to answer any questions you guys have. So Miranda, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So some of you might know a lot of the changes, but some people might have no clue. Polar Plunge is looking a lot different this year. We are doing kind of like a plunge down a hill theme essentially, and all of our events have switched to a sledding type event or outdoor adventure. A couple of the locations are offering snowshoe races, and then we also have a virtual option. Registration is open, but none of the events start until February 6th through the end of February. And with the virtual option, you can sign up and get your cozy kit at a pickup location in February, and they're all listed out on the website. And we can also send this information to you. It's kind of a lot of information, but we're basically having people pick up their cozy kits, and it's like your event t-shirt, some hot chocolate, a cute mug, some do-it-yourself Polar Plunge ideas, and just a few more goodies in there to kind of bring the plunge to you. And we do have so far a lot of agencies and schools taking advantage of that for this year and planning some sort of plunge on their own. Like as an agency or as a school, they do a little sledding event themselves, or they'll do like a ice bucket challenge type thing. And all the fundraising aspects are mostly still the same. You know, you can post on your social media and ask people to donate to your team. Something else a little different is having people register online ahead of time. We're not really allowing any day of registrations at any of our in-person adventure locations. And then the other new thing for agencies and schools is that the rebate looks a little different. So those of you who've plunged in the past and had fundraising teams, you'll get a 25% rebate back to your agency on the amount that you raise up to what you raised last year. And then any amount that you raise beyond what you raised last year, you'll get a 50% rebate on that. So say your team raised $1,000 last year, and this year you raised $2,000. You would be getting 25% on the first 1,000 and then 50% on that second 1,000. So I believe that's $750. So like a pretty big rebate back to your agency. And then new teams, we didn't want to disclude them from the extra incentives. So we kind of set a threshold where you would get 25% back on the first 1,500 raised, and then 50% back on any raised beyond that 1,500. So I think that's a really exciting new thing that we wanted to offer this year for our agencies. And then we also just wanted to promote it as being like a fun group activity that agencies and schools can do together. As you know, like right now, a lot of people are itching to do things. And you can kind of make it your own, do it in small groups, do it outdoors. So just lots of options. That's all I could think of, and just wanted to open it up in case anyone had any questions.
Miranda?
Mhm. Hi.
I would like to have you email me what our amount was from last year, because I don't remember.
Sure, I can do that.
Thanks.
Of course.
Is this Miranda from Special Olympics Wisconsin?
Yeah, I work for Special Olympics, mainly in the Region 2 area.
Hi Miranda, so this is Mike. So I was talking with Bailey. Or no, it was Hannah. She said she's gonna talk to me a little bit about the polar plunge and kind of help out all the 9,000 athletes. Kind of just help out around the state. Find ways to do it. Just help the athletes out. I don't know.
Yep, all the fundraising does stay, of course, for Special Olympics, and then with our agency rebates, it really goes back into the community, local groups of athletes too. So it's been
That's why
great.
she said she's gonna give me a call tomorrow.
Good,
So
cool.
Hey Miranda, so there is a plunge location. There's at least one in every region, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Uh,
For a sledding one.
Yep. And the only one, I guess, Wisconsin Rapids is the only one in Region 2 as of now, and it only offers snowshoeing. I'm working on a second location still, in Medford for sledding, but there's a lot of COVID protocols, that they're trying to make sure we can work around. But otherwise, yeah. And all of it can be found on the website. Not that you might remember this, but it's it's plungewi.org if anyone wants to check it out. Or I'm not sure if you guys are sending like a follow-up email after this meeting and want to just put that in there and then put thanks Brittany, my email in there so that anyone who like thinks of a question later on tonight, I would be happy to help.
Yep, we'll send a follow-up and I'll include both of those.
Okay. Yeah, and anyone also who wants to know what their agency raised last year because they maybe forgot or whatever, you can email me for that too, and I'll get you your number from last year so you can set a new goal for this year.
Miranda?
Yeah.
Hi, it's Claudia from West Dallas. I just want to say that I think that's such a great idea what LETR and they came up for this to get everybody out there and stuff, to do sledding or whatever else. I know we are going to be doing something. Hats off to you guys. Thanks so much.
Oh yeah, of course. I think a lot of people are excited too about it being more of like a family event this year and a little bit of a different twist on polar plunge. So thanks.
All right,
Any
thanks,
other
Miranda.
questions? Okay. Yeah,
And
for sure. So what's up?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so email me if you guys have any questions. We would love everyone to participate and get out there and have fun. And I guess another thing I forgot to mention with your chilling at home plunge, we want everyone to send pictures and videos of whatever creative ideas they come up with for plunge so that we can promote them on our website and for everyone else to do. And I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Right, and then for photos and videos, is that going to the media email account or is it going to a different one?
I'm not necessarily sure. Sorry that I don't have an answer on that. I think whenever you sign up, that info is in the registration email. I just don't necessarily know off the top of my head.
Perfect. All right. Or you can just flood Miranda's inbox.
Go for it.
Well, thank you. And the information for the website and Miranda's email is in the chat. And then, like we said, we'll also include it in the follow-up email that gets out after these meetings.
Thank you guys. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Miranda. All right, to move, going into the phasing things, we'll share our favorite website for this week, just so you get an idea of what the numbers are looking like. And actually we've kind of cleared that hurdle from the Thanksgiving holiday, and you can see now we're back to the majority of the state is in that navy blue color here. And again, for the counties who are in navy blue, that gives you the okay to start programming in phase 1. So small groups of 10, and that would include the athletes and coaches, volunteers. So if you're going to get a full 10, it's probably going to be 8 athletes and 2 coaches that are involved in that. And then we ask that parents not be in the area for spectating or anything like that, and be more dropping off for practice and that. You can have multiple small groups of 10 if they're 50 meters apart or further. So I, specifically would work out better for a winter games than maybe necessarily basketball skills. But if you have multiple gyms at a school, you might be able to make it work for basketball skills. And the one thing we're asking everybody is that if you are in a county where you're okay to go back to phase 1, and you are starting or restarting your program, you have to let your athletic director know so that we can track which programs are there, and therefore if your county were to go back into where we need to be in phase 0, we can contact those who are just only those who are participating. Or if the county goes to where you would be approved to a petition for phase 2, that we would be able to notify you as well. So again, the sports team meets weekly. We look at this data, we look at what agencies are doing what, and come up with a plan for some of those things. So I just wanted to I always love to start off the meeting with the chart so you get an idea for where we're at. Last time we met, you can see the difference. So this is currently, we go back 2 weeks. Well, maybe we'll take a little bit. So that was last week here. And then 2 weeks ago when we last met, you can see we're in a much better spot right now than we were previously. We almost had kind of flipped the number of counties that were in critical to the ones that are in very high right now. So obviously still not ideal, but we're heading in the right direction right now. We'll keep monitoring this. And then just like I mentioned and gave caution to for the Thanksgiving holiday, we really will have a really good idea of what next year's competitions, all that stuff looks like. Probably our second coaches meeting in January, once we get past a couple weeks after the holidays, we'll be able to get a better understanding of which way these numbers are going, but they have been going down lately, and hopefully we'll keep going that way. So
Jason,
yeah,
I have a question. Can you go back to that screen?
Sure.
Is that the current
That was the one
on Wednesday?
Yep, this is the one on Wednesday, correct.
Okay, so there's none of them that can go back. They're all either dark blue or red, are they not?
Red is critical, so that's over the 1,000 mark. That would be
Okay.
at phase 0. The navy blue is at the very high mark, and that's approved to go back to phase 1.
But I thought we had to be under 700, and my screen says 860.
Yep. So it was probably 2 coaches meeting ago. We had mentioned that we had updated our phasing to match the website. So we created the 700 number because the Wisconsin Department of Health did not have a number higher than very high at the time when we created our phasing guidelines. And so when they created their level above very high, which is critical, they set that at 1,000. And so to keep it consistent with being able to follow their levels and to follow their recommendations, we had moved ours up to 1,000.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, sorry. So yeah, that was updated. I want to say about 2-3 weeks ago, or probably no, it was probably closer to 3-4 weeks ago. It was
I don't
definitely
think I
prior.
was in on that one because
Yep.
we're going by the 700. Okay, thanks for
Yep.
clearing that up.
Yep. That way it makes it easy. If you look at the map, you can take a quick look and you can kind of get a feel for where you're at rather than looking directly at the numbers. But it's always good still to know the numbers. If you're, right now, if you're in the navy blue and it's the upper 900s, you're not super clear yet. It could bounce back up next week, but gives everybody an opportunity to kind of follow along to the same.
Hey, Jason, I have another question while you have the screen up.
Sure.
So I was looking at the Dunn County Facebook page. It said we were in the very high, but it says like we have 15,000 cases. But are we below that threshold?
You have to remind me, I have to look, remind me where, I'm looking at Dunn County, you said? Yeah, so right now I
we-
have it Dunn County at 779.4. So that'd be below that 1,000 threshold. And I know, Mike, I know you're in a unique case and we can touch base with you afterwards too, but since you're bowling with a different group right now, we would follow what your host agency is doing. So when if they restart bowling, then you would be able to restart at that time. Okay,
Okay, I can follow up with you after the meeting.
sounds
here.
good. All right. So that's the first part. The second part was going to just remind people we had sent out a Q1 intent to play right around last meeting that included winter games, basketball skills, and the fitness challenge. If your agency has not filled that out yet, we ask that you please do so. That just gives us a better idea for planning for some of those events, can try to get a good idea for what numbers to expect. And then if you've already filled out the first basketball skills one, but not this Q1 one, we're just asking you to fill that out, so we have updated information on it. I know some people were struggling to get gym spaces. So if you're still, if you were struggling the first one, but maybe you found a space, or maybe it's the other way around, we just want to keep good tabs on what's going on with that around the state for that. Next, since the numbers are kind of starting to head in the right direction, we wanted to give you guys an update for bowling. I know that those questions started to come up last meeting. So Nicole and Michaela, if you want to share the plans for the restart for the bowling league, assuming that numbers keep cooperating.
Yeah, so as long as you're in that phase 1 category, you can restart bowling in groups of 10 or less. So if you're in that spot right now, you can begin practicing, but as Jason said, please let us know if you do that. And then we do plan to restart the bowling league in early 2021. It probably will not be started before Martin Luther King holiday. We just want to kind of, as Jason mentioned, give a couple weeks after Christmas and New Year's to make sure that we're still trending in the right direction in terms of community spread across the state. So we won't start until that second to last week of January, but it'll be pretty much the same structure. We'll want, you won't need any qualifying scores. We'll want 2 scores per week. If you do start bowling and you front load on scores, we will accept all of those scores at the start of the league. And then once your athletes hit the 14 score mark, we will start dropping off scores from the front and filling in on the back until we've dropped off all of the scores that were taken from the pre-league bowling. But we'll say we'll leave behind the scores from the previous league and kind of start fresh. So that's just if you're starting practice before the end of January. And then if you bowl more than 2 games per week, we'll record the 2 best scores and kind of keep that 3rd score again, just as a backup. If your agency has to shut down again, that will have some scores to hopefully get your athletes to that 14 mark. We do plan to do weekly challenges again, and those will just be week by week based on your athletes' 2 best scores. So if you submit any scores before, or if you submit more than 2 scores per week, we'll just take the 2 best scores for that. Let me see, anything else? I think that's it. We'll continue to keep everybody updated at the start of January, but as Jason mentioned, we may not necessarily know an exact timeline until more towards the middle of January, but we'll be shooting for that either that week after MLK Day or the following week in January. Did I miss anything, Michaela? Awesome. Any questions for anybody about bowling?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
Nicole, well, I'm still kind of confused. We're now, our agency or our county is now in phase 1. So we are supposed to go back and then how many weeks would we have before your restart date?
So you do not have to go back right now, by any means. We're not going to start the league up until the end of January at the earliest. So if you just would like to wait until that league starts, that is totally great.
Okay,
But if agencies are wanting to do that and restart, as long as you are below that 1,000 threshold, you can do so.
okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and just to clarify on that too, that if your county is was in the very high and would be okay to go to phase one, that just gives you the opportunity to restart if you would like to and you feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's your decision once you are able to restart, if you feel safe doing so and comfortable doing
And
so.
when you restart, how many weeks are you, because I'm assuming some agencies, we were not, we got 1 weekend to my knowledge. But if some of them had others, how long are you expecting to go on the restart? How many?
So we're
weeks?
just starting fresh. So the scores that were submitted last fall are not going to count for this league, and we'll do the similar 7-week structure. I believe we will confirm that once we start, but it'll probably be the same 7 weeks, 2 scores a week for a total of 14.
Okay,
And then those first 2 scores will just count towards your starting handicap. They won't count towards your final score in the league.
okay.
So Nicole, are you
do we-
anticipating then that we'd go through the end of February for bowling?
Yeah, probably into early March if we don't start until the end of January.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, bowling and I think we're kind of playing it by ear depending on what else we're able to offer. Bowling is kind of one of those things where as long as we can meet in small groups, you know, you don't need to travel for competition. Everybody can easily social distance and wear a mask at practice. So it's kind of one of the safer options right now.
Hey, Nicole, there's one in the chat. It said the fall scores won't count even if they got all their scores in already.
No, fall scores will not count. Yeah. So I'll leave it at that.
And I will, and as this kind of goes along, and we'll talk about the other sports as a little bit later, but we are not restricting people just to one sport in a sports season. So if you're looking at that timeline and say, oh, we're also looking at starting basketball skills, you can do both. I know that that's a beneficial thing for the people who want to do both. I also understand that can put a strain on an agency if they were planning on doing both but don't want to run both simultaneously. It just unfortunately with the way timeframes work, as far as the COVID numbers spike here this fall and still going to be offered bowling, that's just something to keep in mind. And then kind of the thing that we've kind of been preaching through this whole thing has been flexibility, and bowling can happen at it has a much lower threshold to get back into it because you just have to be into phase one to be able to start getting scores for bowling. Whereas basketball skills, we're going to need to get into phase two, in order to get to competition and do some of those things too. So we are aware that there's a crossover there. We're not limiting people, but we do understand that does put additional pressure on agencies who are planning on doing both.
And athletes still always have the option to bowl on their own and submit scores to their coach. And then those scores can be turned into us for the league. So you don't need to host a formal bowling practice if you don't have the capacity to do so. Yeah, Jake.
Yeah, for bowling, can like, for my agency, I haven't heard if we're gonna go do bowling next, like in January. For Oregon agency.
Yeah, we'll see. I can talk to you and your mom and Elisa and see if we can figure something out for you to bowl on your own if everybody's okay with doing so. So we can talk about it, Jake. There's some options.
Is Dane County still under the gathering restriction?
No, so for Dane County agencies, you should have gotten an email from me today, but we have a new order where gathering sizes are limited to 10 people indoors. So it aligns perfectly with our phase 1.
So where's Dane County that threshold chart that you had up?
We're in phase 1 for SOE as well.
I mean, for that trajectory.
Yeah,
Mark?
Dane County is in the very high category, so we're in phase 1. Anybody else for bowling before we move on? All right, feel free to email Michaela or myself if you have any additional questions.
All right. And right around that same time frame too, I know I mentioned basketball skills, but we also have winter games coming up. We did have our first winter games management team meeting. So not only within our phase guidelines, but also from SOI, they're recommending events to be 50 people or less. And with winter games, that's what we're anticipating doing. That doesn't mean total. That means in each one of our venues, since they are spaced out 50 meters apart, and we're going to find ways to separate and not have people go back and forth to them. So it doesn't. So from the capacity side of things, it does not affect downhill skiing and snowboarding. It does not affect cross-country skiing, just based off our previous numbers, but it may affect our snowshoe. And we've kind of discussed a little bit of some ideas about this. What the committee had come up with for snowshoes, again, we're going to offer the 3 most popular races, which is going to be the 100, the 50, the 100, and the 200. And what we will end up doing to keep the numbers of people within that 50-person mark, and it really depends on the number of people who register. We are anticipating less participants than a normal year just with COVID. And we have kind of been for all our different events. But we would schedule shifts for snowshoeing. It could be 2 shifts, it could be 3 shifts. And what we would do is your shift would be determined by what agency you are in. And since it's a 1-day event, we would probably look to, if the numbers worked out, if you're closer to, if your location is closer to Wausau, it's more than likely that your shift would be the first shift, so that gives some people who are traveling from a further distance an opportunity to travel there that morning. And so the shifts are looking to be about an hour and a half. So we're going to run all 3 races in that shift. So you will do, and I don't have the order in front of me, but it's not straight the 50, then the 100, then the 200. There's some strategy to it based on who participates in what. Athletes can participate in the same number of events they normally would, but just be mindful as a coach that it will be in a shorter time frame when it comes to that. We're also going to be using the 1-day scheduling for a cross-country ski venue as well. And so the one thing that's going to be a change for us as we get into the registrations is that we'll be looking for a qualifying score this year. And I know that we may have a condensed practice season and maybe a little bit more difficult to get a score on that. If your athlete had competed previously in the last couple of years, we can use one of their previous competition scores as a qualifying score. So if that's going to be a problem, I'll have a spot on the registration form for you to say use last year's score as a qualifying score, because that's something that's pretty easy for us to find in our system and be able to do that. That just has to do with the fact that we are eliminating a day of competition. So most races we would do a qualifying day and then a final day for that. So since we're just going straight to finals and doing it on Saturday, we would need a qualifying score just to make sure that the divisions are clear and all that type of stuff. Similar to our one in-person event that we've run, which is golf, we are doing virtual awards for that as well. So when you come out to the competition, you'll be doing the competition that day, and then we'll schedule an award ceremony, more than likely the Tuesday after Winter Games. That's been a kind of our standard. And and during that virtual award ceremonies, we do kind of do a little bit of an opening ceremony and the awards with that. We are also are going to be looking into doing a virtual opening closing ceremony celebration. It may look similar to what we just had the last couple of nights. It may be a little bit different, but we do want to celebrate the athletes who are competing in that. And then similar to the other sports that we have put out there to offer it in person, we will also have a registration for agencies to say, I would like to compete, but would like to do our times at practice. So those, the at practice athletes will only be divisioned with other in practice athletes. And if you do plan on participating in person, you can also participate in the in practice one as well. So essentially doing your Winter Games sports, you can do them in 2 different competitions and get awards for 2 different competitions. So if you have an agency that may not feel as comfortable of traveling up to Wausau for Winter Games for whatever reason, there's an in-practice option. If you choose to go up to Wausau, we will still have an in-practice option. Your time frame for submitting scores, your qualifying scores, is going to be the same as the registration deadline for Winter Games, which is the rate. I think it's pretty much the 1st of February. I think it's right around that time frame. And then your final scores for the in-practice one would be due Winter Games weekend, which is on February 20th. So that's kind of the general plan for that. We are working on logistics for how that will look for screening as you come in, and how do we make sure people aren't cross-contaminating and all that type of stuff. We are still working on our spectator policy for that. So we'll give you a little bit more of a heads up as we get a little bit closer for people who want to have spectators out at Winter Games. We're trying to figure out the best and safest way to separate and not exposing any athletes to spectators in case there was somebody who were to have COVID at the time. The other thing, Nicole, did you want to touch base a little bit about a little bit of our changes in events for downhill and snowboard, or mainly downhill, correct?
Yeah. So for Alpine, we're changing up the events this year a little bit, and this actually was not because of COVID. We had planned to make some of these changes after last year's competition. So typically the 3 events that we have participants in are slalom, giant slalom, and downhill. And so we decided to eliminate the downhill competition. So typically athletes would do 2 runs in slalom and giant slalom each, and then just 1 run in downhill. So we'll be eliminating the downhill race, but in its place, we'll be adding unified races for both slalom and giant slalom. So now in the past, athletes have had 5 runs each, and with this structure, they'll get 6 runs each. And they can bring their own unified partner if there's somebody that they typically practice or ski with, or if they do not have a unified partner but still want to do the unified events, we'll be able to connect them with a ski team member from Granite Peak to partner in those events.
Perfect. We had the question, will you send out all the dates and events offered for Winter Games in an email or on the website? I will make sure it's updated on the website, but we also will continue to send out information. Probably that first coaches meeting in the wrap up, I'll try to include the registration form that will have all that information as well for both of those. So that's the question. So it will be on the website, and we'll also be sending it out. We'll try to over communicate just so you have that information, and if you choose to use those events. So, thanks for that question. Any other questions regarding Winter Games and the kind of new look for 2021 just for this?
Jason, I'm assuming that we're still doing the protocols for Winter Games, the temperatures, and that kind of stuff.
Yep. We will have and that's the biggest thing that we're trying to work around for spectators. But yeah, so every volunteer, coach, and athlete in the competition area, when you show up to the event, there'll be we'll take down your information so that in case there's we find out about a positive test, we can contact you and let you know that you've been in contact. We will ask you the protocol questions that you should be doing at practice, as well as doing a temperature check as people come in, which I know it's a little bit harder outdoors in the cold, but we got some thermometers that might work a little bit better in that for winter games. We are talking about in our protocols of having separate check-in stations for cross-country skiing and snowshoeing to really keep those people separate. The spectator part is the difficult part. Is if we flag off an area where it's only a competition area and spectators are on the outside of that, then we wouldn't necessarily do the protocols. But if they're going to be in a close confined area, we would have to have even spectators go through those protocols. So that's the biggest thing we're trying to figure out and how we can set that up at winter games. But the COVID protocols that you should be doing at practice, we will also be following at winter games. And that includes masks, which, fortunate for winter games, it's typically cold and people are already kind of wearing masks, whether it's COVID or not. But we'll be enforcing that for people in competition areas as well. And we're looking at our warming tent options to try to minimize multiple agencies gathering in small spaces and trying to find a way to make it comfortable, but also safe for everybody.
So I have another question. They're supposed to be wearing masks during competition or during practice?
So the way it's phrased is masks should be worn at all times except for during cardiovascular activity. Was the only exception that we had in our mask rule, and that was the SOE mask rule. The current state mandate, I guess that it's different for outdoor. I know the indoor current state mandate does say that masks should be worn at all times exercising indoors. I'll double check that for outdoors, but the way that we had phrased it was that masks should be worn at all times, unless it's, if it's one of those things that if they're going to do their sprint at that time, they would be able to pull the mask down so they could breathe during that event. But then immediately after they compete, they would be able to put it up. But we'll double check the state mandate, since that also trumps what we do. So that's a good question. And like I said, I'll look into that and either be able to provide that in the follow-up email, or we'll touch base about it first meeting in January. And, the other thing I should mention too for winter games, I think I mentioned it before. Like I said, we're not doing an opening ceremony and dance and dinner like we normally would at the hotel, and we are not providing lifeguards at the hotel like we normally would, just because we're trying to minimize numbers and that type of stuff. We do still have hotel rooms available at the Special Olympics rate that you would book directly through the hotel. If you're going to book your rooms and then use agency funds, there's a spot on the registration form for that. So those rooms are still available. The block is open for Friday and Saturday night. So for those of you who are traveling, you do have the option to stay overnight if you choose to do that. And we, again, ask you to do it in a safe manner when you're planning that. All right.
Jason,
Yeah.
real quick, what hotel are we going to be at? Or were they planning it?
Golly, why is this slipping my mind? Brittany?
Stony Creek,
Stony Creek.
which I think is technically Ross. I don't know how to say it. Rothschild. However you say that town. It's technically not in Wausau, but it's very, very close to the.
Yeah, it's
venues.
across from where it was. It's Rothschild. Okay.
That's the one.
Yep.
Stony Creek.
Stony Creek.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Was that the new hotel? Was that, we've been there a year or two, right? I know we were
Yeah,
there
I
last
think
year.
this will be our third year, I think, at that hotel.
And I know, Mike, you had asked in the question about having no spectators at all and no parents. We did talk about that when we've done our phasing for all this stuff, that there is a potential that we would ask for no spectators if we can't control an area where spectators would be at. Ultimately, if the choice was to not have a competition or to not have parents, we would like to offer a competition, and then we would ask the parents not be at the competition or spectators in general. But we will continue to figure that out for winter games specifically. And I saw Brittany also answer that in the chat. Did you have another question, Mike?
I'll follow up with you after the meeting.
Perfect. The other things after winter games, I just wanted to do a couple real quick recaps, and I'll hand it off to Brittany. So first off, we've got some questions about 2021 sports seasons, kind of getting past winter games and basketball skills. When we get started, I just kind of get a reminder, we did send the memo out in October with the general idea for what we're planning on doing for sports for 2021. Just like everything else, it's a little bit flexible. We're coming up with plan A, B, C, D for everything right now. But we want to try to offer as many events that we can safely for the athletes. So right away at the beginning of the year, you will have winter game sports happening. Basketball skills will be happening in February and March, as well as the fitness challenge, which Brittany will touch base on. We are still, if it's allowable with the numbers, planning on doing swimming and track and soccer in a similar time frame that it normally would be. So your swim meets being in April and track meets being in the beginning of May, as well as, and then we were planning on having a single day track meet that's separate from a single day state swim meet. Those locations and dates are still to be determined as we kind of figure out where these numbers are going with things. But we are still planning it. That's the way of the season, rather than having a state summer games at Stevens Point, to make sure the events are small and safe. We were doing those separately. So we would have a one-day state track meet, a one-day state swim meet, a one-day state soccer tournament. And then we would do, again, then following from that, it's kind of the same time frame that we would run a normal sports season. We have a date booked for state OST at Carroll University. That's August 7th, I believe. But that is, again, this year it's going to be a one-day event, no housing that would be involved in that. That's actually since we're close to the school year, but also just from a safety standpoint. So we're still planning on doing those things. And then the one thing, and then still planning with doing a state volleyball tournament in the fall and state flag football tournament in the fall. And then next fall's bowling season is a league for the regional bowling component, and then we would advance people into two different state tournaments, one at Weston and one in Wauwatosa at Bolero. So that was the memo that we had sent out in October. We got a few questions about that. I think we got a few questions specifically about track and what we're planning on doing with that. As long as the numbers cooperate, that's the plan. I will tell you again, we're planning plan A, B, C, D. So there is a way we may look to, we may look at adjusting when we offer, as far as pushing it back a couple of weeks or whatever that would be. We'll know a lot more by our second coaches meeting in January, what the numbers are looking like after the holidays. So that's kind of our big, that means could be a little bit of a bigger one as far as giving you an idea for time frame, what, how winter games is looking, how basketball skills is looking, all of that. But we are going to try to offer it in the normal time frame as long as COVID numbers cooperate with us. So just want to touch base on that. Mike asked about USA Games. I'll get into that in just a second because I'll go over what we got from SOI this week. Jake, did you have a question? Go ahead, Jake.
For OST?
Yep.
Wasn't there talks about doing a torch run opening ceremony?
That I'm not quite sure yet. I think they had started talking about what they want to do with the torch run since we're not at Stevens Point, but I don't have any details on that. So when they figure that out, we'll probably have Sarah come on and touch base about that. Okay. Perfect. The other thing that we asked, we mentioned last meeting and got asked about leading up to this meeting was vaccines. And like I mentioned last meeting, we would go by the guidance that Special Olympics Incorporated would have for vaccines. And we actually got a memo this week that what they said about vaccines was that they are currently talking to health organizations to figure out guidance for vaccines, and they will let us know when they know, which is kind of what we were expecting and kind of what we said last time, but that's the official memo on that. They, in that memo also was talking about keeping event sizes smaller, just to make sure if there's spread of COVID in the area, to try to keep events under 50 or less, which is what we're planning on doing. But they did say that at this point, they're still planning on those, like the 2021 and 2022 competitions, but obviously would have their criteria for cancellation or postponing on those. So for USA games, we're still going forward with our planning. They're still going forward with their planning, and we'll just keep everybody in the loop like we're doing for everything else for if there's any changes in our process or their process. So that's kind of what we got from SOI recently. So, all right. I feel like I've talked enough. Brittany has some important information for the fitness challenge, so I'll hand it over to her.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give another update on the fitness competition that we'll be offering in the early part of next year. So I gave some information before, so some of this might be repetitive, but I know there's some new faces on the call, so I just want to give a brief rundown. So this will be a virtual competition that can be done at home. It could be done in a practice setting if you're able to find a space to do so, but the great thing about it is it doesn't require any equipment and it doesn't require a lot of space. So it is definitely intentionally set up so that athletes can do it in their own home without any equipment or space. Based on the intent to plays that we've gotten back so far, there's actually a decent amount of interest, which is very exciting. So I think we will be offering 3 different levels, similar to basketball skills where there's different intensity levels. In each of those levels, there will be 4 different exercises. The exercises will be based on a lower body exercise, a upper body, a core, and a balance. And they're meant to be stepping stones. So for example, and I will share all these rules with you in the future, but just as an example, for the lower body exercises, the lower intensity level will be a sit to stand. So sitting in a chair and standing up and sitting back down and going until exhaustion. And then the middle level intensity would be a squat. So basically doing that same movement except without the chair. And then the higher level intensity would be doing a wall sit. So if you're not sure what a wall sit is, basically sit against the wall as if there was a chair there, but there's not. So as you can see, it's the same type of movement, but it gradually gets more and more intense with each different level. So hopefully having these set levels and these set exercises make it a little bit easier on you coaches to determine where your athletes fall as far as which level they should belong in. I will share a full rule book and explanation of these exercises. They actually come with videos, which are really great. And all the explanations not only show you how to do it safely, which is very important, but also what needs to be done to collect the scores for the competition piece. That will be provided that first week back in January. I'm still working on finishing that up. So I won't have that to share in the follow-up email. I'm sorry, I don't have that yet, but we'll share it as soon as we do. We'll also have registration forms. We are working on a practice plan. It is not something that you necessarily have to follow, but I know that this is it's a new sport, if you will. And some people have different levels of comfort with fitness and workouts. So we wanted to provide, sorry, my dog wants to join the conversation. We will provide a practice plan for folks that want it. You by no means have to follow it. It's just guidance in case you need some ideas on how to run your practices. We will also have SOE-led practices, similar to the workouts that I've offered throughout this entire COVID time, but they will be specific for the fitness competition. I don't intend for this to replace the agency practices. I look at it as more of a supplemental option. Of course, if you don't have a coach or somebody to lead the fitness competition, this is something that your athletes can go to, but my hope it would be a supplemental practice for athletes that are competing. In general, just a timeline. Again, I'm still kind of finalizing the specific dates, so I'm going to give a vague timeline. But that first week of January, I will provide the rules and registration forms for you all to have. Those rules will also include those videos that I mentioned. Mid-January, I would like to offer, similar to what we're doing tonight, but very specific to the fitness competition, I will offer a coaches training to really get into details and demonstrate each of the exercises so that people are as comfortable with them as possible, especially in a virtual world. I've led some workouts myself, and it's challenging. It has its challenges to lead workouts via Zoom or whatever platform you're using. So I want to have a coaches training for folks to make people, it'll be optional, but to make people as comfortable as possible. The first round of scores, hang on, Mike, I just want to get through this and then I hopefully will answer your questions. The first round of scores will be due most likely that first week of February. It'll kind of be a rolling entry. There won't be one specific date, but that first week you can submit scores. About 4 to 5 weeks later, so looking around the first or second week of March, we will have a mid-season score due, and that will help us division. And then 4 to 5 weeks after that, which will bring us to around early to mid-April, final scores will be due, and that's what people will be awarded on. When coaches submit scores, it's just kind of that raw score from the exercise. So if you're doing squats, it's just that number of squats. We will work on converting it to a score, which will then put them in their division and put them in their awards. You guys don't have to do all the calculations on that. I will say that the scores will be based upon improvement. I guess that's what I mean by calculating that score. So you're not comparing Susie to Johnny, you're comparing Susie to Susie. So hopefully people are improving throughout the competition, and you're seeing how much they're improving, I guess is what they're being judged on. I think that's all I have to share now. Like I say, I'll have more specific information that first week of January, but are there any questions that I can answer now?
What about agencies or my agency that isn't allowing it and I still want to participate? How do I do that?
Yep, we will find a way. I'm still kind of figuring out the logistics of that. But athletes will be able to participate even if their agency is not active at the moment.
You have a couple questions, Brittany. One about COVID waivers for fitness competition participation, and then about Unified.
Yeah, so COVID waivers would apply if you're doing your competition in person, as like, let's say you were able to find some gym space, or you honestly wouldn't even need a full-on gym. It could just be like common area of a church or school or something. But if you were meeting in person, you would need the COVID waiver. If you're doing it at home, you do not, because there's no interaction with other people. So if you're doing it via Zoom, you wouldn't need that COVID waiver filled out. Unified partners, there will be a unified option. So again, still kind of waiting for more intent to plays to come in, but it looks like we'll have plenty of people. So we'll have an individual, everybody will automatically fall into the individual category, but there will be an option for unified pairs, traditional pairs, unified teams, and traditional teams. So we're trying to give as many options as possible. So there, I say teams, just to say that might entice people. Let's just say if I had a team basketball, that's obviously we're not offering team basketball this year, but maybe you still want to get your basketball team together and they could do fitness together. So all their scores will be counted as one and they'll be competing against other teams. But if you wanted to have a unified team, you could do that as well. So yes, unified, I don't know if that answered the question fully, but yes, unified will be an option. And yes, you can do this while doing bowling and winter games. This is something that can be done, and even basketball skills. It's something that can be done alongside any of those. Sorry, my dogs are barking if you can hear that. Any other questions? Great. I think just the last thing on the agenda was just a reminder. So our first meeting back will be that first week of January. So that falls on Thursday, the 7th. And then we'll continue every other week following that. There's really no end date right now. We'll kind of see where COVID takes us and when we no longer need these meetings. But for now, we'll have them on the calendar every other week going forward. So, and I will continue to send out reminders that day. and then follow-up emails as well, like I've been doing.
I would say I got one more to reiterate a question from the chat that I got. Bowling start date, that's the week of January 25th. It was what we're talking about, correct? Or is it the 18th?
Yeah, it'll probably be the 25th, potentially that week before, but there's a Monday off. So yeah,
Yep.
we'll just go with the 25th. The
Okay.
earliest it would start would be January 25th. Yes. But again, we'll kind of confirm again after the holidays and once we're back in the new year.
Jake, you can unmute if you have a question.
This is Sharon. I have a question. So we can't start taking scores till after the 25th of January? I guess
No, so you can start taking scores right now if you are able to practice. We just want to kind of separate this from the last bowling season. Did everybody freeze? Oh no. Okay. We just want to separate from the last bowling season just because some of those scores were taken like in August. And that's just at this point. We want to kind of start fresh. So if you start practicing now, you can hold those scores and submit them. But again, the true league competition won't start until at least January 25th.
So I should tell my bowling coaches that once we get out of the clearance, we can start bowling. Once we start up, I don't know when we'll be able to start up, to start keeping scores, and then you guys will figure out how they fit in with your
Yeah,
schedule.
definitely. Yeah. So if you are currently bowling, I would say just keep all your scores and just note the date that they were played. And then we'll do all the back end stuff once the league starts.
Waukesha County is still in phase 0 though, so there should be no bowling.
Oh yeah, I know there's no bowling, but I'm just trying to figure out what to tell the coaches that if and when we start again, have the bowling alley start from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
Go ahead, Jake.
Did you guys forget to address about powerlifting in April?
Yeah, and powerlifting right now, we're planning according to that, but it's going to ultimately come out to Joe on what that competition looks like, if he has the venue available and the officials and all of that type of stuff. So we'll update that as we get closer. We're talking with Joe about what's going on with that, but we will have an update as we get closer to that season. So, but it's one of those things. If you normally would start practicing, I know there's powerlifting programs that practice year round. If you normally would be practicing and you have the okay from your venue and you follow the protocols, you would be able to start practicing, but we'll have an update on competition as we get a little closer.
And the same would be true for gymnastics as well, if there's any gymnastics agencies on the call.
Oh,
Go ahead, Jake.
I got a personal trainer that at Anytime Fitness.
Okay, yeah, you feel free to use a personal trainer, as long as you can do it in a safe way and you follow our protocols and their protocols. Okay.
Okay.
Great. Well, it looks like we're just a couple minutes over that 8 o'clock hour. So thanks again for taking the time tonight. And yeah, happy holidays, everybody. Have a happy new year. January 7th is the next meeting. So hopefully you guys get some time to relax and take a little break from the craziness. And then we'll hopefully see a lot of you in person starting the beginning of next year. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Hey, Jason, you said you were